The Maya got high on frog juice and drilled into skulls, yet their patients lived. Your dentist still needs 6 shots to numb your gum line. Ancient surgery was brutal, precise, and somehow effective. Egypt's medical manuals and mummification. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where medicine was part science, part magic, and fully terrifying. Doctors weren't just doctors. They were priests, exorcists, and part-time embalmers. Want a prescription? Better chant a spell while applying that honey. Yes, honey. The Egyptians smeared it on wounds like neosporin because it actually kills bacteria. That's not a joke. Modern science backed them up 4,000 years later. Their medical knowledge wasn't improvised. It was written down on papyrus scrolls with actual case studies. The Edwin Smith Papyrus is one of the oldest surgical manuals in the world. It describes 48 trauma cases, most from head injuries. One says, "This man has a gaping wound to the skull. Prognosis, unfavorable. Translation, he's toast." Then there's the Ebers Papyrus. Think of it as a CVS receipt that never ends. It lists over 700 remedies for everything from bad breath to disorder of the anus. Their go-to ingredients? Crocodile dung, crushed beetles, and moldy bread. And weirdly, some of it worked. Moldy bread contained penicillium, the same stuff that gave us penicillin. They didn't know why it worked. It just did. Now, let's talk mummies. The Egyptians were obsessed with preserving the body for the afterlife, which gave them a front-row seat to human anatomy. Want to know how they discovered the brain wasn't important? They yanked it out through the nose and tossed it. The heart, though? That was sacred. They left it inside, because according to them, it held your thoughts, feelings, and sins. Not your brain. That was filler. Embalmers weren't guessing. They had tools, bronze hooks, resin, soaked linens, natron salts. Organs were stored in canopic jars, each with a different god's head on top. And if you thought this was limited to pharaohs, nope. Even middle-class Egyptians could get a budget version. Like the Costco of embalming, less gold, same creepy results. Bottom line, the Egyptians weren't playing. They practiced medicine with a blend of trial, error, and divine intervention. Some of their treatments were genius. Others were just crocodile poop. Either way, they were centuries ahead of everyone else. And they did it in linen skirts, Sumerian healing spells, and clay tablets. Before hospitals, before Hippocrates, before anyone figured out soap, there were the Sumerians. Living in Mesopotamia around 2100 BCE, they were the first people to write stuff down, including how to treat a throbbing head, a bloated stomach, or a body full of demons. Spoiler, it involved a lot of plants, some mud, and yelling at the sky. In Sumer, illness wasn't a medical issue, but a personal offense to a god. You sinned? You got sick? You angered a spirit? Boom, diarrhea. Their doctors, called Azu, were more like magical pharmacists with serious anxiety. Step 1. Figure out which deity you offended. Step 2. Make it right with an offering. Step 3. Drink something awful and hope for the best. But here's the wild part. They didn't just pray. They documented. Thousands of clay tablets dug up in cities like Nippur and Lagash list treatments for snake bites, infections, tumors, and toothaches. One cure for a swollen hand? Crushed turtle shell, mashed figs, and a chant to the god Enki. Side effects may include still having a swollen hand. And it wasn't random. These texts show patterns. They grouped symptoms. They labeled body parts. Some even recommended diet changes, like switching to soft bread and goat's milk if your belly was acting up. That's right, ancient Sumerians invented bland food therapy. They also had pharmacological lists. Over 250 different ingredients are recorded, including willow bark, which contains salicin, a chemical cousin to aspirin. That's not luck, that's observation. The Sumerians might have believed in demons, but they also noticed when something actually worked. And then there were the spells. These were recited during treatments, and were not optional. One chant went, "May the hand of the ghost be removed. May the demon depart. May the bile settle." That's basically an ancient Yelp review. Felt a lot better after ghost removal. 5 stars. Doctors and priests worked side by side. One grinding up roots, the other screaming into incense smoke. A diagnosis might come from symptoms, or how you reacted to a sheep liver reading. Yes, divination via organs was totally a thing. So, were they right? Sometimes. Their methods were half logic, half cosmic guesswork, but make no mistake, this was the beginning of medicine, written in stone, literally. Ayurvedic foundations in the Indus Valley. Head west of Mesopotamia, and you hit the Indus Valley civilization, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and a bunch of brick cities so clean they'd make modern city planners cry. These folks weren't just tidy, they were obsessed with hygiene. Long before anyone knew what bacteria were, they were flushing them out of town. Picture this, stone toilets in almost every home, drains running through the streets, and public bathhouses that actually worked. This wasn't luxury. It was urban health infrastructure in 2000 BCE. While Europe was still figuring out how to not eat dirt, the Indus people were scrubbing themselves daily. But here's where it gets deeper. This wasn't just about being clean. It was part of a larger health philosophy that would later evolve into Ayurveda, India's ancient system of medicine that's still around today. Back then, they didn't call it that yet, but the seeds were already planted. At the core of early Ayurvedic ideas were the three doshas: Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Think of them as body energies. Too much of one? You're sick? Just enough? You're golden? The balance was controlled by everything: diet, sleep, weather, emotions, even the moon. If your stomach was angry, maybe your Vata was throwing a tantrum. And their treatments? Root-based. Literally, neem for skin problems, turmeric for inflammation, ashwagandha for stress before it had a name. Some plants were crushed, others boiled. Some you'd rub on your skin, others straight into your nose. Don't ask. They also believed in seasonal eating, daily routines, and fasting. Not for weight loss, but to reset your body's internal factory. They wrote about digestion, immunity, mental clarity, and aging. Basically, all the wellness influencers today are just remixing Indus Valley advice with better lighting. So while the West was curing disease with amulets and goat breath, the Indus Valley was running a wellness spa with actual plumbing. No hype, just clay pipes, herbs, and a serious skincare routine. Chinese pulse diagnosis and herbal lore. In Shang Dynasty China, a weird pulse in your wrist meant more than just bad circulation. It could mean your spleen was stressed, your qi was stuck, or your liver was throwing a tantrum again. Around 1600 BCE, during the Shang Dynasty, Chinese healers weren't cutting people open or yanking brains out through noses. They were reading pulses like palm readers, only smarter. They believed your body was run by qi, a kind of life energy that flowed through meridians. If it got stuck, boom, disease. No qi, no peace. But they didn't stop at vibes. They watched, they recorded, and they built a full-body operating manual, the foundations of what would become traditional Chinese medicine, TCM. It wasn't all superstition. Many of their treatments, especially herbal remedies, still show up in pharmacies today. Let's talk pulse. To them, it wasn't just fast or slow. There were 28 types of pulses. One throb might mean you're angry, another, your kidney's depressed. Yes, your kidney. Emotions were tied to organs. Anger lived in the liver, fear in the kidneys, grief in the lungs. So, if you were sad, your doctor might not tell you to cheer up. They'd give you herbs for your lungs. Speaking of herbs, their medicine cabinets were stuffed with roots, bark, flowers, and animal bits. Licorice root, ginseng, and ginger were powerhouses. Deer antler? That was like Red Bull. Tiger bone? Well, that one didn't age well. But they believed in harmony, yin and yang, hot and cold, bitter and sweet. Balance was everything. They also dabbled in acupuncture, using sharp stones and later bronze needles. Not randomly either. They mapped meridians like a subway system. And yes, they believed needling a toe could fix a headache. Laugh now, but modern researchers are still studying how those pressure points actually work. Ancient Chinese healers weren't butchers. They were listeners, observers. They treated your body like a garden, something to nourish, trim, and rebalance. And if that meant stabbing your foot to fix your lungs, that's just good medicine. Hittite plague protocols and isolation orders. The Hittites didn't just fear war, they feared plague. And when people started dropping like flies, they didn't light candles, they wrote policy. Sometime around 1400 BCE, a mysterious epidemic tore through the Hittite Empire. Bodies piled up, priests panicked, and the royal court got involved. This wasn't a minor rash. It was empire-level disaster. So what did the Hittites do? They documented the entire mess, with orders, rituals, and even travel bans. Yes, travel bans. Ancient ones, clay tablets found in Hattusa, their capital, revealed the closest thing the Bronze Age had to a CDC. There were specific instructions: isolate the sick, purify the space, sacrifice some goats, and under no circumstances let infected foreigners in. One text flat out says, "No one from Arzawa shall be allowed into the land of Hatti." Border control, activated. But this wasn't just about fear. The Hittites noticed patterns. Disease came with people. People came from war. Their king, Suppiluliuma I, had just conquered parts of Syria. And guess what showed up with the prisoners? Yep, the plague. A few months later, the king was dead. Coincidence? The scribes didn't think so. They also had cleaning rituals so intense, they'd put modern germaphobes to shame. Rooms were smoked with incense, floors washed with special water, and priests recited lines like, "Be gone, sickness, be gone." Simple, direct, slightly threatening. And the doctors? Forget herbs. These guys were ritual technicians. Their job wasn't to cure, it was to reset the cosmic balance. That meant spells, sacrifices, and total environmental cleansing. If someone sneezed wrong, it could trigger a 5-day purification cycle. It wasn't science the way we know it, but it was early epidemiology in action. They tracked outbreaks. They traced origins. They reacted fast. The Hittites didn't just pray, they took notes. And honestly, that puts them ahead of some modern governments. Greek rational medicine and the rise of Hippocrates. If you got sick in ancient Greece, it wasn't because a demon crawled into your ear. It was because your bile was in a bad mood. Welcome to the land of humorism, the grand medical theory that said your body was run by 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If they were balanced, you were healthy. If not, diarrhea. Or worse. But here's the real twist. They stopped blaming the gods. Around 500 BCE, Greek thinkers, especially one guy named Hippocrates, flipped the script. Illness wasn't divine punishment anymore. It was natural, observable, and maybe even treatable. That shift? Huge. Hippocrates basically said, let's stop praying and start writing. His name is slapped onto the Hippocratic corpus, a massive collection of texts that laid the foundation for Western medicine. These scrolls talk about symptoms, prognosis, diet, and surgical techniques, like how to reset a dislocated shoulder or drain pus from an abscess. Did it still involve leeches and bleeding? Oh, absolutely. But now it came with instructions. Hippocrates also believed in something radical: bedside manner. Doctors should observe patients, ask questions, keep their hands clean, seriously, and not scream, "You're cursed," after 5 minutes. He even introduced patient confidentiality. Ancient Greece had HIPAA before HIPAA. The most famous part? The Hippocratic Oath. It wasn't exactly the version doctors recite today, but the original still packed a punch. Swear by Apollo, treat the sick to the best of your ability, and never give poison, even if asked. No euthanasia, no abortions, no cutting for bladder stones. That was outsourced to specialists. And always, always respect your teacher. You know, unless you wanted the gods to smite you. So no, they didn't cure everything. And yes, they still used a lot of vinegar and hope. But Hippocrates and his crew dragged medicine out of the temple and into the clinic. And honestly, that was the healthiest decision Greece ever made. Persian hospitals and mobile clinics. In the Achaemenid Empire, medicine wasn't just for priests or philosophers. It was an organized, state-backed operation with actual health infrastructure. A concept most other empires hadn't even sneezed on yet. The Persians, especially under rulers like Darius I, took health seriously. They ran traveling medical caravans, literal mobile clinics, loaded with herbs, ointments, and practitioners trained in Zoroastrian medical texts. These roving doctors would roll into cities, villages, even battlefields, delivering care like ancient EMTs in sandals. And they weren't improvising. The Avesta, Zoroastrianism's sacred text, included detailed descriptions of disease, healing, surgery, and sanitation. It said healing came in 3 forms: through the knife, through herbs, and through holy words. Yes, surgery, pharmacology, and therapy, in that order. That's how the Persians categorized medicine before most cultures had even figured out how to clean a wound without screaming. Persian cities like Susa and Ekbatana had actual hospitals, early versions of bimaristans, which would later evolve under Islamic rule. These weren't temples, they were facilities for the sick, staffed, supplied, sometimes even separated by illness type. If that sounds advanced, that's because it was. Doctors weren't freelancers either. They were trained, often state-employed, and licensed. That's right, bad diagnosis? You could be fined, or worse. The Persian Empire was a bureaucracy on steroids, and that included healthcare. Cleanliness was next to godliness, literally. Zoroastrians believed that contamination, especially from corpses or bodily fluids, was a form of spiritual pollution. So they built elaborate water systems, banned open defecation near water sources, and enforced hand-washing as a religious duty. Ancient Persia had health codes when the rest of the world was still arguing with thunder. Roman engineering and public health. Rome didn't just build roads. It built a health empire. The Romans believed a strong body made a strong soldier, and strong soldiers made a strong empire. So they treated public health the way they treated everything else. Aggressively, logically, and with way too much concrete. First up, aqueducts. Rome's pride and joy. These massive stone arteries delivered clean water from miles away into homes, baths, fountains, and latrines. By the 1st century BCE, the city of Rome had 11 aqueducts, pumping in over 200 million gallons of water per day. That wasn't just for show, it was survival. Next, public baths. The thermae weren't luxury spas, they were mandatory hygiene centers. Citizens scrubbed down daily, sweating out grime in steam rooms and rinsing in freezing pools. It wasn't optional. Dirty bodies meant disease, and Rome liked its people and its slaves sanitized. But Rome didn't stop at cleaning bodies. It cleaned streets too. The Cloaca Maxima, their giant sewer system, flushed waste out of the city. This was 2,000 years before Paris figured out how to handle poop. Romans weren't above filth, they just wanted it somewhere else. And then there were latrines, public ones, with running water. Some even had communal sponges on sticks, rinsed between users. Gross? Yes. But in Roman terms, hygienic innovation. Healthcare for soldiers was especially advanced. Rome had military field hospitals, complete with surgical tools, triage protocols, and medical officers called medici. They performed amputations, stitched wounds, and treated infections with wine-soaked bandages. Battlefield ERs, Roman style. Enter Galen, the empire's medical superstar. A Greek physician working in Rome around the 2nd century CE, he wrote over 500 treatises on anatomy, surgery, and physiology. He dissected animals, pigs, monkeys, whatever he could get his hands on to understand the human body. He was wrong about a lot, thanks to not dissecting humans, but his theories ran Western medicine for over 1,300 years. And here's the kicker. Romans saw health as a civic duty. Build strong sewers, protect clean water, treat injuries fast, and your empire lasts longer. It wasn't compassion, it was strategy. Rome didn't invent medicine, but it scaled it. If cleanliness is next to godliness, Rome paved the road there in marble and called it infrastructure. Mayan surgery and hallucinogenic healing. Let's get one thing straight. The Maya weren't just astronomers and calendar freaks. They were hardcore body hackers, performing surgeries, modifying skulls, and prescribing drugs that would knock you sideways. In city-states like Tikal and Palenque, medicine was a combo of botany, blood, and the supernatural. Health wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, cosmic, and sometimes straight-up psychedelic. If your soul was out of sync, you didn't get a pill. You got a shaman, a hallucinogenic enema, and a prayer to a crocodile god. Yes, enemas. They used tubes carved from gourds or bones to deliver fast-acting herbal or psychoactive mixtures through the express route. Substances included tobacco, peyote, and a jungle brew called balshay, a fermented honey drink sometimes laced with tree bark and frogs. Not kidding. The goal? Purge, cleanse, reset. Ancient detox, Maya edition. But it wasn't all trippy rituals. The Maya practiced real surgery. Evidence from skeletal remains shows trepanation, drilling or scraping a hole in the skull to treat trauma or pressure. And many of those skulls show healing, which means some patients survived. That's not ritual, that's precision. They also mastered dental work. Jade, obsidian, and turquoise were drilled into teeth, not randomly, but with shockingly accurate technique. These weren't decorative stones glued on for show. They were carved, inlaid, and often filed into shape. No anesthesia, no Novocaine, just grit and a steady hand. Mayan healers, called Amen, were trained professionals. They memorized thousands of plant uses and knew which leaf to crush for a fever, which bark to brew for a cough, and which mushroom would make you talk to the underworld. Their botanical knowledge was so advanced that modern researchers are still finding parallels in contemporary medicine. They believed illness had causes: bad blood, broken energy, angry gods, or a breach in the spiritual world. Treatment was customized. A stomach bug might get you a cup of roasted cacao with chili and sap. A curse might need a chicken sacrifice and a sweat lodge ceremony. You didn't go to a Mayan healer just to get better. You went to realign yourself with the universe, or at least stop vomiting frogs. For the Maya, medicine wasn't trial and error. It was trial and trance. And somehow, it worked. Islamic Golden Age and the Medical Revolution. By the 9th century, while Europe was treating illness with prayers and leeches, the Islamic world was building universities, hospitals, and surgical libraries that would make modern med schools look lazy. Enter the Islamic Golden Age, a time when science wasn't just respected, it was funded, translated, copied, and leveled up. Cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo became medical powerhouses. And at the center of it all, a Persian genius named Ibn Sina, or, as the West calls him, Avicenna. His book, The Canon of Medicine, wasn't a casual read. It was 5 volumes, packed with over 1 million words and hundreds of diseases, diagnoses, treatments, and surgical procedures. It became Europe's go-to medical text for over 600 years. 600 years. But Avicenna wasn't alone. There was Al-Razi, Rhazes, who ran a hospital in Baghdad and wrote the first real guide to differentiating smallpox from measles. He also insisted on evidence-based treatment and rejected superstition. Radical idea: don't guess, test. Hospitals in the Islamic world weren't temples or death rooms. They were bimaristans. Free, public institutions with wards for specific diseases, medical records, pharmacies, and training centers for students. Patients were separated by condition. Doctors did rounds, and surgeons actually washed their hands. Hygiene was enforced. If a doctor messed up badly enough, they could be banned from practicing. They also required licensing exams. You couldn't just throw on a robe and start poking people. You had to study, train, and prove you weren't a butcher with a god complex. And if you prescribed mercury for a headache, you'd probably get booted. Doctors cataloged hundreds of drugs, from opium for pain to camphor for cooling fevers. Pharmacists were a real profession, and prescriptions had to be measured and written down. This was standardized medicine centuries before the term even existed. Mental health? Covered. There were psychiatric wards, with music therapy. In the 10th century, the point wasn't magic, it was method. These scholars preserved Greek, Roman, Persian, and Indian medical texts, then tested, corrected, and expanded them. While Europe was still bleeding people with rusty blades, the Islamic world was running clinics with charts, ethics, and antiseptic rinse bowls. They didn't just heal bodies, they rewired the entire logic of medicine and left everyone else scrambling to catch up. Welcome to ancient healthcare, where your doctor had no soap, your medicine came from a goat, and your mild fever killed half your village by lunchtime. Let's tour the diseases that didn't give warnings, they gave body counts. Ergotism in Neolithic Europe. You know what's worse than stale bread? Bread that kills you. Back in 4300 BCE, early European farmers stored their grains in damp pits. Great for mold, bad for humans. One mold in particular, Claviceps purpurea, loved to grow on rye and barley. When baked into bread, it didn't just make you hallucinate. It shut down your blood vessels, triggered seizures, and made your limbs rot off. Welcome to Ergotism, or what medieval folks later called St. Anthony's fire. But here's the twist. These Neolithic deaths weren't just freak accidents. In Poland and France, archaeologists found bodies in mass graves with no trauma, no signs of violence, but sudden burial. Soil tests in those areas? Off the charts for ergot alkaloids. One study found fungal residues in ancient cereal stores, proof that people were basically eating their way into the afterlife. Symptoms came fast. Burning skin, vomiting, convulsions, and hallucinations that made people think the devil himself had moved in. Some victims went into shock and died within 24 hours. Others slowly lost fingers and toes as their tissue blackened and died. Imagine getting gangrene from a sandwich. And no one had a clue. These were early agrarian societies. No doctors, no germ theory, just a growing suspicion that the food itself might be cursed. Which, in a way, it was. Some tribes even linked it to spirits or punishment from gods. And they weren't exactly wrong. Their gods just had spores. This wasn't a one-off incident either. Grain stores were a lifeline, but also a landmine. One bad harvest, and the whole village was tripping into seizures by spring. Modern science finally caught up in the 20th century when researchers connected ergot to LSD's chemical cousin. So yeah, Stone Age farmers were microdosing death. So next time you thank ancient civilizations for agriculture, maybe skip the rye. Neolithic Northern Europe. Before the Black Death, before Justinian, plague was already making house calls in Stone Age Europe, and it wasn't subtle. Around 3300 to 2900 BCE, something wiped out entire farming communities across Scandinavia, the Baltic, and Central Europe. Archaeologists originally blamed war or migration, but in 2021, scientists sequenced ancient teeth from Neolithic skeletons and found the oldest known strain of Yersinia pestis, the plague bacterium. Surprise! The Grim Reaper had a prehistoric travel itinerary. This early strain wasn't quite the bubonic nightmare it would become. It didn't ride fleas yet, but it still killed fast, likely through droplets, coughing, sneezing, close contact. And when it hit, people didn't get sick slowly. They dropped fast. Some graves show entire families buried at once. No signs of trauma, no signs of burial ritual. Just bodies stacked and forgotten. One grave in Sweden held a woman, child, and infant. DNA from the woman's teeth matched Y. pestis. They didn't die in battle, they died in days, maybe hours. Researchers think this outbreak played a major role in collapsing Europe's early mega-settlements. These were large, dense communities of farmers, some over 10,000 people. Once the plague hit, populations plummeted. The survivors either fled or starved. Entire cultures blinked out, and nobody knew why. There were no symptoms recorded, no cure, no warning. One day you're trading barley and pottery. Next day, your neighbor coughs and you both die before the goats finish bleeding. What's wild is this version of the plague was still in beta. It hadn't yet evolved the flea-to-human vector that would wreck medieval Europe. Even without its final form, it was still fast, lethal, and contagious. It took 5,000 years, multiple mutations, and a lot of rodents to turn into the Black Death. But this was the original version 1.0 of humanity's worst bacterial nightmare. And yes, it started before we even invented writing. So technically, we were dying of plague before we were dying of boredom in history class. Smallpox in ancient Egypt. If you've ever seen the mummy of Pharaoh Ramesses V, you've already met smallpox. His face, covered in pitted lesions. Not war wounds, not acne. That's smallpox, one of the oldest and deadliest viruses ever unleashed on humanity. For a long time, people thought smallpox showed up around the 1500s. Then came the CT scans, microscopes, and 21st century genome sequencing. Between 2020 and 2023, researchers traced smallpox's roots way further back. Turns out it's been around for at least 3,000 years. Right on cue, Ramesses V's mummy shows textbook pox scars, making him one of the earliest human receipts we've got. Modern Egyptian medical papyri, like the Ebers Papyrus, don't name smallpox directly, but they describe illnesses involving fever and pustules that match its symptoms. The disease's pattern of striking children and royalty alike disrupted inheritance lines and ritual calendars. Some scholars believe temples recorded abnormal death counts during certain years that may line up with viral surges. While no variola DNA has been extracted from Ramesses V himself, the visible scarring on his mummified skin remains one of the strongest visual clues in the ancient world. He wasn't just a casualty, but a case study sealed in linen. The disease moved fast. After a few days of fever, victims broke out in a blistering rash that covered their whole body, inside and out. If you were lucky, you died from organ failure or infection within a week. If you weren't, you lived, scarred, blinded, and immune, which is the ancient version of, "Congratulations, you survived." Egypt was the perfect incubator. Hot climate, crowded cities, armies marching across borders, trade ships floating down the Nile, all ideal for viral hitchhikers. Once smallpox arrived, it didn't just stick around, it thrived. Priests blamed angry gods. Physicians bled people or smeared them with goose fat. Nothing worked. The rich died slower, the poor died faster. And Ramesses? His mummy suggests he didn't go quietly. His pox lesions were so severe, he may have died mid-outbreak. Historians now believe smallpox helped shape dynasties. Kill enough nobles and power shifts, interrupt enough harvests, and famine follows. It wasn't just a health crisis, it was political. Modern analysis even suggests smallpox may have existed even earlier, possibly around 1600 BCE in India or China. But Egypt gave us our first visual proof. A dead king, preserved for millennia, still showing the battle wounds. Smallpox didn't just change history, it mummified it. The plague of Athens. Democracy was dying, literally. In 430 BCE, Athens was stuffed wall to wall with citizens hiding from Spartan attacks. One tiny problem: no sewers, no hygiene, no personal space. When a mystery disease slipped in from the port of Piraeus, it didn't knock. It kicked the door off its hinges and burned the house down. According to Thucydides, the Athenian historian who caught it and lived, the plague killed up to 100,000 people in just 4 years. Victims burned with fever, bled from the eyes, erupted in ulcers, and died within a week. Some collapsed mid-sentence, others stripped naked, ran screaming into fountains, and drowned. It was madness wrapped in pus. No one knew what it was. Theories flew: typhus, measles, bubonic plague, even Ebola. Anachronistic, but sure. Then in 2006, Greek scientists analyzed dental pulp from a mass grave near Kerameikos. The lab results? Salmonella enterica serovar typhi, aka typhoid fever. Not the flashiest name, but it gets the job done. This wasn't just a public health disaster. It was a strategic implosion. Athens, cultural capital of the Mediterranean, lost generals, farmers, orators, and soldiers. Pericles, the leader of the Athenian Golden Age, died during the outbreak, after catching it twice. The war effort sputtered. Morale bottomed out. Doctors had no clue. They reused cloths, treated fevers with wine and hope, and died trying to help. Contagion theory didn't exist yet. Medicine was more pray and bleed than isolate and recover. And the survivors? They weren't always lucky. Some got it twice. Some lived, but lost fingers, sight, or sanity. Others suffered seizures and became walking cautionary tales. By 426 BCE, when the worst had passed, Athens looked nothing like the marble democracy it sold to the world. Sparta didn't need to storm the gates. The germs broke in first and did all the heavy lifting. Next time someone says civilization peaked with the Greeks, feel free to agree. Then remind them that it also vomited, raved, bled, and dropped dead in the streets while arguing about philosophy. Dysentery after Canae. The Battle of Canae was already a bloodbath, but Rome's worst day got even worse, in the latrines. After Hannibal's army wiped out over 50,000 Roman soldiers in a single afternoon, using brilliant tactics and a lot of angry elephants, thousands of survivors fled. Many hid in swamps, ravines, and anything far enough from the battlefield to stop the bleeding. Unfortunately, that's where the real killer waited. Not a sword, not a spear, bacteria. Enter dysentery. Likely caused by Shigella or Entamoeba histolytica, both happy to spread in water contaminated with human waste. Which is exactly what you get when 80,000 men flee into marshes with no toilets and drink from the same streams they're squatting near. That's not a metaphor, that's Roman military planning. Symptoms came on fast: severe stomach cramps, fever, nausea, and relentless diarrhea that drained the body dry. Soldiers who survived Hannibal's cavalry collapsed in their own filth a day later. Some accounts claim more died after the battle than during it. You don't need an ambush when dehydration can kill in 48 hours. Polybius didn't call it dysentery. He just said the bodies swelled with decay. Modern medicine filled in the rest. Fast-acting, waterborne, highly infectious. That's classic amoebic dysentery, straight from the textbook of things you don't want to catch in a swamp. Doctors at the time were useless. Roman battlefield medicine included wine rinses, ash poultices, and lizard blood. They didn't believe in bacteria. They believed in imbalanced humors. Guess what didn't fix explosive diarrhea? Balancing your humors. And here's the kicker. Hannibal's troops got it too. His men were also stuck in contaminated fields, and despite winning the battle, his army slowly rotted along the same path. Victory looked good on paper. In reality, both sides were being picked off by invisible parasites. All because no one thought to boil the water. Canae didn't just become a military textbook case, it became a lesson in battlefield hygiene. Too bad the Romans didn't take notes fast enough. They kept losing men to dysentery for centuries. So next time someone talks about the genius of Hannibal or the might of Rome, just remember, what really ended the day wasn't strategy or steel. It was diarrhea, lots of it. And fast. Leptospirosis in Han China. In the Han Dynasty, people feared a fever that came fast, burned hot, and ended badly. They called it rat sickness. And honestly, that's about as accurate as ancient medicine ever got. Modern researchers believe this was leptospirosis, a bacterial infection spread through rat urine in drinking water, crops, or open wounds. The bacteria, Leptospira interrogans, swim like a corkscrew through your bloodstream. Victims looked fine one day, then collapsed the next. Fever, jaundice, muscle breakdown, then kidneys stopped working. Game over. Historical texts describe sudden, widespread deaths in flood-prone areas. Farmers, soldiers, laborers, anyone working barefoot in rice paddies or trenches. The Han court even restricted water use during outbreaks, though they had no clue what they were stopping. Leptospirosis moves fast. It can kill in under 48 hours. No visible injuries, no obvious source. Just organ failure, confusion, and internal bleeding that made people think spirits had sucked out the life. And yeah, this was a water empire. The Grand Canal, river systems, irrigation, great for trade, also great for rat pee. In 2023, researchers studied ancient burials in eastern China. They noticed death spikes after seasonal floods. The timing lined up with modern leptospirosis outbreaks. Same regions, same patterns, just separated by 2,000 years and a lot of rats. There's no dramatic mummy here, no battlefield, no burning city, just quiet collapse. People went to sleep feeling sore and woke up drowning in their own fluids. Treatment back then? Herbal tea and prayers. Neither worked. This wasn't a one-time thing either. It likely reappeared every few years, killing fast, disappearing just as quickly. That's what makes it hard to trace. Leptospirosis doesn't stick around. It just shows up, empties a few villages, then vanishes into the paddies again. Now, if you ever feel bad for the guy hauling buckets through monsoon season in ancient China, remember, he probably wasn't killed by war or famine. He just stepped in something. Flesh-eating curse in Roman legions. Roman soldiers feared more than arrows. They feared what happened after the battle, when a tiny cut could turn into a death sentence overnight. Welcome to necrotizing fasciitis, aka flesh-eating bacteria. In the 1st century CE, Roman medics didn't know what caused it, but they knew the signs. A wound that turned black, swelled like a wineskin, and reeked worse than a latrine? Yeah, that guy wasn't marching tomorrow. Medical texts by Galen and Celsus describe putrid flesh and rapid decay that spread beyond the injury. They tried everything: wine, hot oil, even cutting away muscle. Nothing stopped the spread. Some soldiers begged for amputation. Others died before anyone grabbed a knife. Modern historians believe this was Group A, Streptococcus, or Clostridium perfringens. It entered through minor wounds, especially in dirty camps. Once inside, it released toxins that liquefied flesh. You didn't just get infected, you dissolved from the inside out. Death could come in 12 to 24 hours. And the Roman battlefield was the perfect incubator. Blood, dirt, metal. No antibiotics, no sterilization, just herbs and hope. Field surgeons operated with bronze tools and bare hands, spreading the bacteria like a buffet line. Some medics even called it a curse from Mars, the god of war, punishing weak men. Real cause? Rotten bandages, contaminated water, and the bacteria playing speedrun through human muscle. One account from Celsus tells of a soldier whose leg turned black by nightfall and killed him before sunrise. They burned the body to stop the poison, which was somehow the smartest thing they did. Today, necrotizing fasciitis kills 1 in 3 even with modern care. Back then, if you got it, you were dead. Fast. So, sure, Roman soldiers were tough, but no amount of bravery saved you from bacteria that didn't even need a sword to end your campaign. Anthrax, in Mesopotamia. In ancient Mesopotamia, the gods weren't the only things farmers feared. There was something far more immediate and a lot less divine lurking in their pastures: anthrax. Clay tablets from the time mention sudden outbreaks that killed both animals and their handlers within hours. Victims broke out in black sores, gasped for breath, and died foaming at the mouth. Not demons. Not curses. Just Bacillus anthracis spores doing their thing. Anthrax is a bacterial killer that spreads through contact with infected meat, soil, or air. And once those spores hit your lungs or bloodstream, you're on a timer. Inhalational anthrax can kill in under 24 hours. Cutaneous cases, spread through handling contaminated hides, gave people black, crusty lesions. Ancient Sumerians even called it the black sore death. Mesopotamian texts don't use the word anthrax, obviously, but they describe symptoms that line up eerily well with modern clinical cases. Modern studies show anthrax spores can survive in soil for centuries. One 2020 report even found live spores in old livestock pits. The ancient symptoms? They line up a little too well. The spores can survive in soil for decades. Farmers unknowingly plowed up old killing fields every planting season. One scratch on the hand, one breath during a dust storm, and that was it. Game over. And remember, this was a society built on livestock. Sheep, goats, oxen, and every home had animals. Every animal had blood, and every blood spill was a potential outbreak. Treatment? None. Recognition? Zero. The only strategy was to burn the bodies, avoid the field, and pray the gods didn't strike twice. Today, anthrax is a biohazard. Back then, it was just a really bad Tuesday. One day you're tanning a cowhide. Next day, your skin's turning black and your lungs are shutting down. They called it divine punishment. We call it a bacterial time bomb. Tuberculosis in ancient India. In the 6th century India, people whispered about a sickness that stole your breath and hollowed you out. It didn't slash or burn. It just stayed quiet, invisible, and drained you until your ribs showed and your voice gave out. They called it the white cough. We call it tuberculosis. But this wasn't the slow, wasting kind we think of today. Some cases were lightning fast. A modern form called miliary TB spreads through the bloodstream and fills the lungs like a fine mist. You don't cough for weeks, you drop in days. Think headache, high fever, shortness of breath, then dead before the village priest can finish lighting the incense. Ancient Ayurvedic texts like the Karaka Samhita describe sudden cough, fever, wasting, and death. Victims were isolated, not because they understood germs, but because nobody wanted to join them in the grave. Which, fair. Modern paleopathologists have confirmed tubercular lesions in ancient Indian skeletons, especially along the spine. Biomolecular evidence confirms that TB has been around since Neolithic times, way back in prehistory. That means TB wasn't just present, it was raging. And it spread like wildfire. India's growing cities, trade routes, and temples brought people close. One breath in a crowded market was all it took. No antibiotics, no masks, just your immune system versus an airborne assassin. Priests tried herbs, chanting, and purification rituals. None of it worked. And the worst part? The disease didn't always look dangerous. Some people walked around infectious for weeks, coughing quietly. Others just keeled over after 3 days. Miliary TB made ancient people think they were cursed, sickened by ghosts, karma, or impure thoughts. But the truth was much smaller. Just a microbe. Just air. Justinianic plague. In 541 CE, something ugly rolled in from Egypt. Not an army, not a storm. A bacterium, Yersinia pestis, freshly mutated, riding fleas, hiding in rats, and about to wipe out a chunk of the known world. Welcome to the Justinianic plague, the first recorded pandemic to go truly global. It hit Constantinople in 542, just as Emperor Justinian was trying to rebuild the Roman Empire. Instead, he got mass death. According to Procopius, the city lost 5,000 to 10,000 people a day. Bodies piled in towers. Some were dumped into the sea. Gravediggers gave up. Survivors lit incense, not for worship, but to mask the smell. Symptoms were brutal and fast. High fever, vomiting, delirium, and black buboes the size of eggs. Victims could die within 24 to 48 hours. If you made it past day 3, you were a medical miracle. Even Justinian himself caught it. He lived, barely. Most didn't. By the end of the first wave, historians estimate 25 to 50 million people died across the empire. That's up to half the population from North Africa to the Balkans. Trade collapsed. Food ran out. Armies disbanded. Cities emptied. People abandoned the sick, then died in the same alley. This wasn't the Black Death yet, but it was the beta version. In 2013, researchers sequenced plague DNA from 6th century German graves. Same bacteria, different strain. A 2022 study confirmed it came from Central Asia, spreading west on trade routes long before anyone knew germs existed. The plague returned in waves for the next 200 years, hitting every generation. It didn't just kill people, but kneecapped an empire. Justinian's dream of uniting Rome fizzled under piles of bloated corpses. One bishop wrote, "The world is dying." He was wrong. The world didn't die. It just smelled like it did. Ever had a headache and thought, maybe I should drill a hole in my head? No? Well, you clearly weren't a doctor in ancient times. Welcome to the wacky world of historical medicine, where the treatments ranged from the bizarre to the downright terrifying. From munching on mummies to taking a bath in electric light, our ancestors had some, let's say, unique ideas about healthcare. So, grab your leeches and your lucky rabbit's foot as we dive into the most unusual medical practices through history. Disclaimer: please don't try any of these at home. Plague doctors, the beaked saviors. In the 17th century, when the bubonic plague was more popular in Europe than the latest fashion, a peculiar figure emerged: the plague doctor. Dressed in a long overcoat and a bird-like mask, these doctors looked more like they were ready for a masquerade ball than medical practice. The beaked mask wasn't just for show, it was filled with aromatic items like herbs, spices, or dried flowers. Why? Because they believed the plague was spread through miasma, or bad air. The idea was that these sweet smells would counteract the bad air. It's like trying to solve air pollution with a scented candle. The outfit didn't stop at the mask. Plague doctors also wore a wide-brimmed hat, which was a common sign of a doctor at the time, and a long overcoat made of waxed leather. They looked like a cross between a bird and a leather salesman. The coat wasn't just fashionable, it was thought to protect the doctor from miasma. They also carried a cane, which they used to examine patients without getting too close. Social distancing, 17th century style. But here's the kicker: most plague doctors weren't actually trained physicians. Many were second-rate doctors who couldn't find any other job, or sometimes not doctors at all. It's like hiring a clown for a birthday party and getting a mime. Their treatments were as unusual as their outfits. Bloodletting, leeches, and even chopping off infected body parts were all in a day's work. And let's not forget the burning of aromatic herbs to cleanse the air. Because when you're dealing with a deadly plague, why not add a bit of aromatherapy into the mix? Despite their ominous appearance and questionable medical practices, plague doctors were a symbol of hope in a time of despair. They braved the streets and homes stricken by the plague, offering whatever help they could. So, next time you visit the doctor, just be thankful they don't show up in a bird mask carrying a stick. Trepation, a hole in the head. If you ever thought modern medicine had some wacky ideas, let's drill into the past with trepanation, the practice of boring holes into the skull. It's like ancient DIY brain surgery, but without the YouTube tutorial. Trepanation is one of the oldest surgical procedures, dating back to the Neolithic period. Back then, if you had a headache, seizures, or even mental disorders, the solution was simple: let's open up your skull. It's like fixing a computer by just randomly removing parts and hoping for the best. The process involved scraping, cutting, or drilling a hole into the skull using primitive tools like flint or bronze instruments. Anesthesia? Not really a thing. Pain management was more along the lines of bite down on this stick and think happy thoughts. But here's the twist: some people actually survived this procedure. Skulls have been found with signs of healing around the holes, indicating that patients lived for years after the operation. It's like they walked off having a hole in their head as if it were just a bad haircut. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth did they think this was a good idea? Well, ancient practitioners believed that trepanation could cure physical and mental ailments by releasing evil spirits or relieving pressure in the brain. It's like they saw the brain as a pressure cooker that occasionally needed venting. Did you know that from a modern medical perspective, there's a tiny grain of truth in this ancient practice? Today, similar procedures are used in emergency medicine to relieve pressure from bleeding or swelling in the brain, like after a severe head injury. Of course, these days it's done with precision instruments, in sterile environments, and with the patient under anesthesia. So, while trepanation might sound barbaric, it was an early attempt to understand and treat brain-related issues. So, next time you have a headache, maybe just stick to aspirin. Leave the skull drilling to the professionals. Mummy powder, the ancient Egyptian panacea. Let's unwrap the curious case of mummy powder, a medical marvel of the medieval world that was, well, exactly what it sounds like. If you ever thought your protein powder was hardcore, think again. Back in medieval Europe, ground-up mummies were all the rage in medicine. Yes, actual mummies, as in the embalmed bodies of ancient Egyptians. It's like someone looked at a mummy and thought, you know what? This could cure the plague. The process was simple yet macabre. Take 1 part mummy, grind it into powder, and voila. You've got yourself a remedy for everything from headaches to stomach ulcers. It's like the ancient version of a multivitamin, but with more personality. But where did they get the mummies? Well, it turns out there was quite the trade in mummified remains. Grave robbers in Egypt would dig up ancient tombs, and the mummies would make their way to European apothecaries. It's like the black market, but with more bandages and curses. The use of mummy powder was based on a misunderstanding. Europeans misinterpreted the Arabic word for bitumen, a natural substance used in mummification, as mummia, or mummy. They believed that the preservation properties of mummification could be transferred to the living. It's like thinking eating pickles will make you immortal because they don't spoil quickly. So, the next time you're browsing the pharmacy, just be thankful that the only mummies you'll encounter are probably in the Halloween aisle. The tobacco smoke enema, blowing smoke. Now let's puff our way into the 18th century, where tobacco smoke enemas were all the rage in medical circles. Yes, you heard that right. It's like someone saw smoke and thought, let's put that where the sun doesn't shine. The tobacco smoke enema was believed to be a cure-all for various ailments, from colds to hernias, and even, oddly enough, for reviving drowning victims. The logic was as clear as a smoggy day in London. Tobacco was thought to warm the body and stimulate respiration. It's like giving CPR, but with more carcinogens. The procedure was simple yet bizarre. A tube was inserted, well, you can guess where, and tobacco smoke was blown into the patient's body. This was often done with the help of a bellows, because why do things by half measures? It's like a barbecue, but instead of smoking meat, well, let's not go there. This practice became so popular that tobacco enema kits were a common sight, especially near bodies of water, just in case someone needed a quick, smoky revival. It's like having a first aid kit today, but with more pizzazz? But wait, it gets even stranger. There were reports of people self-administering tobacco smoke enemas, believing in their health benefits. It's like the 18th century version of a spa day, but with less relaxation and more coughing. Thankfully, by the 19th century, the medical community realized that blowing smoke up someone's backside was, well, just blowing smoke. The practice fell out of favor, and tobacco found its place in cigars, cigarettes, and the occasional stern lecture from your doctor. So, next time you're considering a wellness retreat, just be grateful that tobacco smoke enemas are not on the menu. Corpse medicine, the dead as a drugstore. In the Renaissance, if you thought your local pharmacy was lacking, you clearly hadn't tried the corpse aisle. Yes, you heard that right. Corpse medicine was a thing, and it was exactly what it sounds like, using bits of the deceased in the hope of curing the living. It's like recycling, but with more, body parts. This macabre practice involved using bones, blood, and other less savory parts of the human body in medical concoctions. It's like someone took the phrase, "you are what you eat," a bit too literally. The belief was that the vitality of the dead could be transferred to the living. It's like a very grim energy drink. Mummy powder, made from ground-up mummies imported from Egypt, was particularly popular. It was used for everything from stopping bleeding to curing ulcers. It's like the ancient version of a multi-purpose kitchen gadget, but for your body and significantly creepier. But it wasn't just mummies. Blood was also a hot commodity. Freshly executed criminals were sometimes surrounded by a crowd eager to collect their blood. It was believed that drinking the blood of a strong young person could cure epilepsy and other ailments. It's like a very morbid wine tasting. Even King Charles II of England got in on the action. He created his own remedy called the King's Drops, which was basically alcohol mixed with human skull. It's like a cocktail, but with a twist that nobody asked for. Thankfully, as medical science advanced, the use of corpse medicine began to decline. Turns out consuming parts of a dead body wasn't the healthiest choice. Who would have thought? Right. Soothing syrups, the opium solution for babies. Let's take a stroll down the pharmacy aisle of the 19th century, where soothing syrups for babies were all the rage. And by soothing, we mean laced with opium. Yes, that's right. Nothing says "goodnight, baby" like a dose of narcotics. These syrups, with names like Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup and Godfrey's Cordial, were marketed as a cure for teething pain, coughs, and other infant ailments. The secret ingredient? A hefty helping of morphine or opium. It's like they took the phrase "sleep like a baby" a little too literally. Parents, tired from constant crying and sleepless nights, turned to these syrups for a bit of peace and quiet. After all, who needs a lullaby when you've got liquid opium? It's like the 19th century version of a white noise machine, but with more side effects. The problem, aside from the obvious, was that these syrups were incredibly addictive and dangerous. Babies would often become dependent on them, and overdoses were tragically common. It's like playing Russian roulette, but with a medicine dropper. By the early 20th century, people started realizing that maybe, just maybe, giving opium to babies wasn't the best idea. Laws and regulations were put in place, and these soothing syrups slowly disappeared from the shelves, much to the relief of babies and their livers everywhere. So, next time you hear a baby crying, just be thankful that the solution these days is more rockabye baby and less opium for all. Animal dung, a questionable remedy. Let's dive into a rather smelly chapter of medical history, the use of animal dung as a remedy. Yes, in the days before modern medicine, if you had an ailment, the answer might just have been found in the barnyard. It's like they saw animal waste and thought, that ought to fix it. From ancient Egypt to medieval Europe, animal dung was used for a variety of medical treatments. Got a wound? Slap some cow dung on it. Suffering from a skin condition? How about a nice dung bath? It's like the old saying, if you can't cure it, cow poop it. Okay, maybe that wasn't an old saying, but it should have been. Different types of dung were used for different ailments. For example, dog dung was believed to cure sore throats. It's unclear how they discovered this, and perhaps it's best not to ask. Pigeon droppings were used to treat baldness, because nothing says full head of hair like bird poop. The logic behind using dung was a mix of magical thinking and observation. Dung was warm, and warmth was often associated with life and healing. Plus, it was readily available, and when it comes to medieval medicine, convenience was key. But wait, there's more. Dung wasn't just for external use. Oh no. It was also ingested. That's right, people ate this stuff. It's like the worst dietary supplement imaginable. Modern science, of course, tells us that using animal waste in medicine is not only ineffective, but also potentially harmful. Who would have guessed that rubbing waste on wounds could lead to infections? So, next time you step in something unpleasant, just be thankful you're not expected to use it as medicine. It's one of the few times where stepping in it might actually be the better outcome. Radiation rave, the glowing trend. Let's illuminate the curious case of the radiation craze in the early 20th century, where glowing health was taken a bit too literally. Back then, radiation was the new black, and radium was its shining star. It's like they discovered a glow-in-the-dark paint and thought, let's put that in everything. In the early 1900s, the discovery of radium by Marie and Pierre Curie sparked a glowing revolution. Suddenly, radium was everywhere, in toothpaste, cosmetics, health tonics, and even in chocolate. It's like they thought adding a bit of radioactive sparkle would make everything better. One of the most bizarre products was radium water, touted as a health tonic. People drank this glowing concoction hoping to cure everything from arthritis to impotence. It's like sipping on a nightlight for health. Then there were the radium spas, where you could bathe in radioactive water. It was the spa day from hell, with a side of radiation. And let's not forget the radium-infused cosmetics, because who doesn't want a radioactive blush for that natural glow? We now know that exposure to radioactive materials like radium can cause serious health issues, including cancer. Radium is particularly hazardous because it can substitute for calcium in bones, leading to bone cancer and other disorders. The glowing trend of the early 20th century was a dangerous dance with an invisible and misunderstood threat. The tragic story of the radium girls, factory workers who painted watch dials with radium paint, highlights the dangers. They often licked their brushes to get a fine point, ingesting radium in the process. Many suffered severe health issues as a result. It's a cautionary tale of the risks of new technologies and the importance of understanding their long-term effects. So next time you're looking for that perfect skin cream or health tonic, maybe check that it doesn't glow in the dark. Just a tip. Electric shock therapy, a jolting treatment. Now let's switch on the story of electric shock therapy, a treatment that really puts the shock in shocking. In the world of medical history, this one's a real zapper. It's like someone saw lightning and thought, hey, why not use that to cure what ails you? Electric shock therapy, or electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, began gaining traction in the early 20th century. The idea was simple yet startling. Send electric currents through the brain to treat mental illnesses. It's like rebooting a computer, but the computer is your brain, and the reboot involves a lot more voltage. The procedure was initially used without anesthesia, which, as you can imagine, was not a pleasant experience. Patients often experienced seizures, memory loss, and a whole host of other side effects. It's like getting the worst haircut of your life, but instead of losing hair, you lose memories. But here's the shocker, pun intended. In some cases, it worked. ECT proved effective for certain conditions like severe depression. It's like finding out that the crazy idea your uncle had at the family BBQ actually has some merit. Over time, ECT has evolved. Modern ECT is much safer, typically performed under anesthesia with controlled currents. It's still used today, albeit in a much more refined and humane manner. It's like going from a sledgehammer to a scalpel in terms of precision. So, next time you're feeling a bit down, maybe just stick to ice cream and sad movies. Leave the electric shocks to the professionals. Snake oil, the original fake news. Finally, let's slither into the slippery world of snake oil, the original fake news of medicine. Long before the internet was flooded with dubious health claims, snake oil salesmen were the kings of cure-all concoctions. It's like they looked at a snake and thought, this could cure everything from baldness to broken hearts. The term snake oil originally referred to an actual product brought to the US by Chinese laborers working on the Transcontinental Railroad. This genuine snake oil was made from the oil of Chinese water snakes and was used to treat joint pain. It's like the early version of a pain relief ointment, but with more scales. However, as snake oil gained popularity, enterprising American salesmen saw an opportunity. They started peddling their own versions of snake oil, which often contained little to no actual snake oil. It's like ordering a beef burger and getting a veggie patty instead. Not quite what was advertised. These faux snake oils were claimed to cure just about anything. Headache? Snake oil? Stomach ache? Snake oil. Existential dread? You guessed it. Snake oil. It was the go-to solution for every ailment, real or imagined. The most infamous of these salesmen was Clark Stanley, the so-called Rattlesnake King. He would put on dramatic demonstrations, killing rattlesnakes and extracting their oil, all in front of an awestruck crowd. It was part medicine, part magic show, and all spectacle. But like all good scams, the snake oil bubble eventually burst. In 1917, the government analyzed Stanley's snake oil and found it contained no actual snake oil. It was mostly mineral oil, a dash of beef fat, red pepper, and turpentine. It's like finding out your favorite superhero is just a guy in a costume. The term snake oil has since become synonymous with fraudulent products and false advertising. It's a reminder that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So, next time you see a miracle cure being peddled, remember the tale of the snake oil salesman. Sometimes the only thing being cured is your wallet. Arsenic, a toxic beauty. In our bonus round of historical medical oddities, let's explore the deadly allure of arsenic, a substance that was once as common in medicine cabinets as aspirin is today. It's like finding out that people used to sprinkle a little cyanide in their morning coffee for that extra kick. Arsenic, a naturally occurring element, has a Jekyll and Hyde personality. On one hand, it's notoriously poisonous, but on the other, it was once a sought-after beauty and health product. It's like the cosmetic equivalent of dating a pirate. Exciting, but you might lose an eye. In the Victorian era, arsenic was the go-to for that coveted pale, ghostly complexion. Women, and some men, would consume arsenic wafers or apply arsenic-laced cosmetics to achieve this look. It's like using Photoshop, but instead of a computer, you use a deadly poison. But why stop at beauty? Arsenic was also used as a medicine. Got a fever, asthma, or syphilis? Arsenic to the rescue. It was like the Tylenol of the 1800s, but with a slightly higher chance of death. Slimming, but deadly. Arsenic didn't just make you beautiful. It also promised to help you lose weight. Yes, arsenic was used in diet pills. It's like the early version of a weight loss supplement, but with the side effect of potentially killing you. Talk about a killer diet. People would take small doses, believing it would boost their metabolism and help them shed pounds. The logic was simple, yet fatally flawed. What doesn't kill you makes you thinner. It's like playing Russian roulette with your bathroom scale. Arsenic was so popular that it found its way into everyday products. It was in wallpapers, clothing dyes, and even children's toys. It's like discovering your entire house is decorated in 50 shades of toxic. The most infamous example was the green wallpaper. Arsenic was used to create a vibrant green pigment called Scheele's green. This wallpaper adorned many homes, slowly releasing arsenic fumes, especially in damp conditions. It's like living in a salad bowl, if the salad were made of poison. Eventually, the lethal side effects of arsenic could no longer be ignored. As cases of mysterious illnesses and deaths piled up, the link to arsenic became clear. It's like realizing that the magic elixir you've been drinking is actually villainous potion. By the early 20th century, the use of arsenic in products was largely phased out. It went from a household staple to a cautionary tale in the annals of medical history. It's like breaking up with that pirate. Exciting times, but you're better off without them. Did you know modern medicine still uses arsenic, but in a much safer and controlled way? Arsenic trioxide is used in chemotherapy for a specific type of leukemia. It's a classic case of an old dog learning new tricks, with the dog being a deadly element and the tricks being life-saving medical treatments. We all want to be healthy even without anyone telling us. And then there's Jimmy, who chugs 2 liters of Coke and eats junk food while he sleeps in front of an open fridge. Don't be like Jimmy. Heck, even the government wants us to be healthy to expand the lifespan average of a country or something. But through the years, there have been things done by the government in the health sector that didn't really hit the mark. Prohibition. This happened back in the 1920s, and it was targeted to stop people from using alcohol. Germany could never do that. The government's reasoning with this was pretty funny. Alcohol does crime. Alcohol breaks families apart. Alcohol removes morals. I suggest we remove alcohol from the lives of alcoholics. The government really thought that would work. In January of 1920, Woodrow Wilson, the president of the US back then, put prohibition into working, and it kinda worked at the start. Well, yeah, of course it would work at the start. You completely prohibited alcohol from the country. What would you expect? Of course there would be a decrease in use of it, and medical emergencies related to alcohol. But it's like coffee. It's eventually gonna wear off because it's not something that's useful in the long term. And I was right, because people found a friggin' loophole for it. It's not allowed to make, sell, or move alcohol, yes. But nobody said anything about drinking the beer I got a month ago, said some random guy who was probably having a withdrawal after 2 months of only drinking water. Germans. Guys like Al Capone heard about this, and light bulbs just started popping up all around the heads of the gangsters. They finally have something illegal to do other than killing people and kissing each other on the cheek. It's trading alcohol.
Kissing someone on the cheek's illegal?
Yes, because I'm single. The gangsters smuggled alcohol from Canada, which tasted like maple, and some other places. It didn't help that police that time were getting paid low enough to take bribes from bootleggers. Naturally, gangsters will want to have the whole market to themselves. You know, more money. This is a great picture of what happened in the St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929.
I want all the money.
What? No!
Nice, I get all the money now.
Now there's dead people because of alcohol. There's also dead because of gangs, because of alcohol. There were also dead people because of other things because they didn't have alcohol. In a time that alcohol was not allowed. 1920s America, you were a nice time to live in. Prohibition ended when Franklin D. Roosevelt said it ends. Well, he technically didn't say it ends, but he signed the 18th Amendment that says it ends. DARE program. The entire name of it was Drug Abuse Resistance Education, and the main message of this campaign was basically 4 words: kids, don't do drugs. The LAPD thought of this and managed to implement this on 75% of schools in the US by the end of the 1990s, with the idea that if they get the youth to trust them, they expect that the kids would snitch on someone.
I'm sorry, but this DARE something program is a piece of shit.
A piece of what?
A piece of shit. It keeps bleeping.
What?
It's a piece of, you know what? DARE's not working, basically.
Researchers from University of Kentucky and American Psychological Association even said that it's making children more curious about drugs when it's shown to them, rather than just not knowing about it at all. LAPD even made a slogan for it: just say no. Just say no? Wow. A very perfect way to parent the children that's made up of many different cultures. Very nice. It's a great idea. Don't get me wrong. It's just when it comes to the actual doing. 2009, and DARE became as useful as useless when the Keepin' It Real curriculum was launched. This thing was more interactive than DARE. It was more effective than DARE. And it actually does take the culture differences into consideration. Something that DARE never did. It was like, kids, don't do drugs, but it's more than just a cop yapping in front of the class. The Healthy People 2000 Initiative. This was launched by the Department of Health in 1990 to improve the health of Americans by the end of the decade. It's currently 2024, and I am today years old when I learned about this. From the name itself, it didn't work for shit. It was actually a sequel from the other programs that the first Healthy People Initiative made back in the late 70s, and it had 3 goals: live longer, live healthier, and live safer. Something like that. It's a good thing to test, but the states they planned to implement it to were straight up broke, or did not care about this healthy people thingamajig, because they had more things to prioritize. Healthy People 2000 was also way too ambitious, that the test subjects had that placebo effect thinking that, hey, it's so good, I really hope it doesn't flop. Like that smoking thing. There are many reasons why a person smokes, but Healthy People 2000 was like, no cigarettes for you, congratulations, you're now healthy. As if that solved the problem. When the year 2000 came, only 15% of the goals were achieved. Some of the areas they targeted even got worse, and all I can say about this is a quote from Abraham Lincoln. Those who believe that the Healthy People Initiative will work are either the Healthy People Initiative themselves or stupid. Snooze. It was a campaign pushed by Sweden and was advertised as a healthier alternative to smoking as it decreases your chance of getting cancer. Want me to tell you a secret? There's no healthier alternative to smoking. Anything with tobacco that you put in your body is not healthy. But this was a time before modern vaping, and snus was all about being the vape of its time. Except that you put snus between your teeth and upper lip, and you don't have to smoke it. It was backed by the Swedish government when they showed numbers that snus was used very much, but there are low rates of lung cancer. Introducing the all-new snus. A way out for people who want to stop smoking and a way in for people who want to start. Pick your poison in different flavors today. Also available in water flavor. When the European Union saw that commercial, they were very happy to announce that they're banning snus anywhere in Europe except for Sweden. Not a surprise considering Sweden literally just promoted snus as a healthy alternative. At the end of the day, snus has nicotine, and it's addictive. Nothing they can do about it except... yuck. Anti-fat. It was really a thoughtful campaign, if it weren't for the cluelessness of the people that pushed it about anything under the skin. Get it? Anyway, in the 70s and 80s, heart diseases were the bomb. So explosive that it made people either obese or dead. I mean, come on. Oscar Mayer? McDonald's? Coca-Cola? Hostess? Should I name more? These brands and more contained high levels of saturated fat back then. Let's do the maths. So saturated fat plus heavy eating. Yeah, I got heart disease. The US was so alarmed by this that they began to preach for low-fat foods, and the whole country was on board with that. Soon enough, there were low-fat, fat-free, reduced-fat products hitting the shelves, and this was the start of something bad going worse. Low-fat products have low fat. Duh. If it has low fat, it would taste different, and to compensate for the lower amount of fat, the makers of these foods upped the amount of sugar. Oh my goodness. The sugar content in these foods were already high. Add more, and you get what? Diabetes. That's right. If you don't want to be heavy, cut some limbs off your body is, I think, what they want to say back then. But for the sake of pretending to help, they didn't. And this low-fat, no-fat thing didn't even work by a little. It actually did the opposite of what it was supposed to do, since the obese people from 1980 to 2000 doubled in the United States. It's a good thing that today, diet mindsets get a bit more balanced, and it's more announced now that no one diet fits all people. HIV AIDS policy in South Africa. In 2008, South Africa went through one of the worst HIV AIDS epidemics, but Thabo Mbeki had other plans in mind. When Mbeki got to be the president in 1999, South Africa was already having more and more AIDS cases, and I bet you Freddie Mercury would have done something better than what Mbeki did. I do not think that there's a relation between HIV and AIDS, so South Africa will not use these antiretroviral things. This is a conspiracy theory like the Earth is round.
But the Earth is round.
Conspiracy theory! And that's the beginning of hippie era of South Africans. All because of a dude that got influenced by the Flat Earth Society for AIDS. These people, the AIDS denialists, believed that anti-retro-la-la-la drugs, anti-retro-boom shakalaka drugs, water. Perfect. These people believed that antiretroviral drugs were actually harmful. I swear to God, these people are anti-vaxxers too, and it's because of President Mbeki's decision that millions of South Africans with HIV got delayed medical help. This dude didn't learn his lesson, because in 2008— Hold on. Let me tell them. Yeah, I let 330,000 people die from AIDS because I delayed the ARV drug. I was controlled, okay? I thought those denialists were right. Are you forgetting something? Yeah, 35,000 babies had HIV when they were born. Yes, and the dead would have still been living today, and the babies would have not gotten AIDS if he acted immediately. When Thabo Mbeki was ousted in 2008, thank goodness. By then only that South Africa did better on HIV AIDS response. Swine flu vaccine. It all started with a death. A recruit in Fort Dix, New Jersey just died. Haha, Fort Dix. Everybody thought it was because of the flu. They weren't exactly wrong. They weren't exactly right, too. If it's the flu, it would have been ruled out since this happened in February of 1976. At least that much can be said. Later on, after testing other soldiers, it was found that the type of flu that killed the recruit earlier was a H1N1, almost the same one as the Spanish flu strain. That thing killed millions 50 years before this, and probably reappeared in 1976. Of course, it's bound to burn the hairs of US health officials. The entire administration was like, oh no, you're not going to fool us twice, and dramatically overestimated the size of what it could have possibly been. They ultra-upgraded their health stats a month after, and my guy Ford announced the National Immunization Program. Vaccines were massively produced and distributed as fast as possible, that the government spent the price of 5,400 houses in the 1970s to execute it. How come the action here was fast than when COVID happened? The heck? I'm telling you, the speed and the sense of urgency was the only good thing in this. Because from the get-go, no testing equals no percentage of it being effective. They legit spent $135 million for the cure. For the cure. Like the actual cure. They didn't bother to test the cure. Just $135 million gone. For the cure. Fishy. By fall of that same year, injecting people vaccines with questionable effects was in full force. All right. The questionable effect got answered. Answerable effect. The effect was Guillain-Barré syndrome, a disorder that causes you to move super weak, if not paralyzed. As the number of people being vaccinated increased, So did the number of people that got Guillain-Barré syndrome. I sure hope it stops here. How bad can it possibly be? I'll answer myself. So bad. The flu that the government feared so much did not turn out to be at a pandemic-level virus. It was an flu, and no outbreak was ever reported out of Fort Dix since the recruit died. Ha ha ha, Fort Dix. After that, the government just said whatever and stopped the vaccination out of nowhere. 40 million people have been injected of whatever in their bloodstreams, and just like that, poof, nothing. USA just conveniently walked out the door, pretended nothing happened, and said, "Okay, Cold War time, baby." But you can't expect to walk out of that just fine. Lawsuits, of course, came down raining from those the vaccine affected. That's what you get for believing in Murphy's Law, pellagra. It's a disease that you get when you have a boring diet. Imagine eating corn for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midnight snack. Nothing else, just corn. No doubt you'll get pellagra from that. You'll be able to recognize if it's pellagra with these 4 Ds.
I wish I had 4 Ds.
What? No. The 4 Ds are dermatitis, diarrhea, dementia, and death. What Ds were you thinking about?
D's nuts.
This disease affected a lot of people back in the early 1900s way down south. People with pellagra had skin wounds, overall weakness, weight loss, and mental spacing out. Since people didn't have knowledge about this back then, they thought it was contagious. Well, to be fair, every sickness back then was thought to be contagious, so this wasn't special. Because people understood it that way, that time, the public only had one solution for it: quarantine them, which actually made things worse. See, it's not going to get better if the diet was as boring as corn. The states that were affected by pellagra were actually not a food planting state. They were more of an, I plant something not edible but I can earn from it state. You know, cottons, tobacco, all that stuff. What does this mean? It means they're poor. So pellagra became the poor man's disease during that time, and it stayed that way until this doctor right here named Joseph Goldberger saved them some time between 1910 and 1920s. So it's not because of a virus, I see. It's more of an eating thing. What do these people eat? Oh, what a sad and boring diet. For real though, because in the 1930s, it was found that pellagra can be cured and even stopped from coming. You put vitamin B3 in flour and you're now okay. Victorian London cholera. Back in the 19th century, London was built on 3 things: a growing industrial force, the royal family, and the smell of fresh air from River Thames that will sure to leave you all puking. This was actually what people believed to be the cause of cholera in London back in the 1800s when this was introduced to them. They started thinking the awful smell was coming and rising from the ground because of all the rotting things. I'm gonna clean the streets today, Freddy. What are you planning to do?
I'm planning to kill a man. Put a gun against his head, pull my trigger, now he's dead.
This miasma theory held on to the beliefs of people for a pretty long time because there was no actual evidence that cholera came from somewhere else other than believing that it came from the ground. And throughout the years, there have been so many outbreaks that happened in London alone. And all outbreaks pointed the blame to the fart cloud that surrounded the city, so they just kept cleaning the air. It's a good thing that in 1854, Dr. John Snow looked deeper into this bad air thing. Did John Snow really look like that? Was he poor or something? After some investigation, he eventually found out that it wasn't the air. It was never the air. It was the water that killed thousands of people. Well,
we just can't accept that. You got some really nice proof here, but we're not just going to believe some research-based conclusion over our unproven theory.
I can lower the cases in this city just to prove I'm right. I'm not even going to raise a finger. Then he told the council to remove the handle of the Broad Street pump, and the cases got lower. Dengue vaccine in Brazil. Dengue is a disease that countries in tropical countries normally have. You get it when a mosquito bites you hard enough to give you a skin bump. People with dengue have high fevers, headaches, muscular and bone pains, then some rashes. Now, sometime in 2016, a vaccine that was promoted as the one that will stop dengue was launched by Sanofi Pasteur? Oh, Sanofi Pasteur. Why did it have to be a French name? Anyway, the name of this vaccine was Dengvaxia, and it was backed by clinical tests and all that. But, the trials didn't tell the entire story and left people in more danger than do the job of the quote-unquote vaccine. Those results were nice. Give me about 200 million of them pokey-pokies to veiny-veinies. Obrigado. Millions of Brazilians have been injected with dengue with the hopes that they'll be a little bit safer from dengue, if not totally immune to it. And a large part of those millions were children. But guess who didn't study enough? It's you for your finals exams. It's not only you, though. Sanofi Pasteur also didn't study their vaccine well enough that some studies said that it can only help prevent dengue in people who already got dengue before. Don't tell me. Oh yes, I'm telling you. Those who never got dengue have more chance to get the worse and more deadly version of dengue if they got one after the vaccine. And it's not like you can tell if one got dengue before or not on 206 million people. These things were found out when millions of innocent Brazilians that just want to get safer have already been injected. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a bio-war movie plot for me. After that, it was just a series of I'm passing the phone to someone who I can blame. Witch trials. What? Witch trials? In the late 17th century Massachusetts, people were highly Jesusified with their beliefs, and the justice system was, well, unjustifiable. The one to blame for this uncivilized behavior was the Puritans.
Is that a Puri what now?
Puritan. It was basically an English Protestant who wanted simpler beliefs. So yeah, it was their fault that the people of Massachusetts were like that. When the young girls in the area suddenly went rada rada rada, then screamed and threw stuff around and did their didgeridoo speaking impression, everyone was like, what are they doing? Should we tolerate this stuff? So they turned to Samuel Parris. With the authority that he had and the bias because his daughter was a part of the affected, he stood up to the post.
Since we don't have the technology of the 21st century, we cannot say that what these little girls went through was just them being hangry. So we only have one thing left to believe in. Witches.
Now everyone thought that witches were the public health hazard. They were just hangry, man. Hangry. Then the girls pointed out 3 women, Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. I want you to guess in what way are these women the same. That's right. They were poor, and if they're poor, they're easy targets to put the blame on, and they can be easily eradicated. How about a game of pretend where the people really wanted to kill the person in trial already, but they want to look civilized, so they add an extra step of a very biased trial? Yeah, they played that game on the 3 women. The trial was so unbelievable to the point Jesus Christ would say, I didn't make that stuff, or something. How can you prove that these old, poor, close to dying, weak, almost useless to our town women are the witches?
I saw their spirits doing witchcraft.
What's your source?
Trust me, bro.
I already believe you because your source was to trust you, but do you have any other proof?
Right now, my daughter is affected. She would be better if she touches these witches.
Your daughter acts bad, but your sources trust me, bro. I can't deny that. They're witches. Hang them! The people of Salem enjoyed hanging the innocent so much, particularly this guy, Chief Justice William Stoughton. He was laser-focused on getting to the bottom of a disease that did not exist, which was witchcraft that he told the jury to find every poor dying woman accused of witchcraft to be guilty. 19 poor, weak, dying women hanged, and 1 man pressed to death later. The governor followed his wife, who told him to demolish the most unfair court in history of mankind, and created a physical evidence-based court. I guess the real witches were offended by the fact that everyone thought they were old and poor when they lived in a mansion and just turned 18 years old that they gave Salem the smallpox the time witch trials were being done. Man, I sure do hope nothing else like this happens in the future, even though I know there will be.